And now I'm really going to focus more on a couple tall buildings that we're working on. Last week, or maybe it was this week, it was Ideas Festival Week in Chicago, and I was asked to talk about sensuality in architecture. I think because I designed a building that has curves, but I don't know. But I told them I'm not really going to be talking about that. So I actually showed the MoMA project, which I'm going to show to you too at the end. So the city today, you know, how it looks downtown is amazing. Like, you can imagine living, working in the same space. But cities are so much about change, and a lot of times we pass judgment on cities in China because, you know, they're dirty and so on. But, you know, if you look at Chicago 100 years ago, it looked like that. And, you know, there's no way you could even walk to the lakefront as a pedestrian. It's a city that's always all about transportation and commerce and the movement of goods. And so it was able to transform its image, its identity in 100 years, less than 100 years. But tall buildings obviously are, you know, they're compact and they allow density. Everyone here knows this, but, you know, when you go around the country, people are very scared of high rises. Basically, you can really compare the carbon footprint for a settlement pattern in suburbia to one in a dense downtown. It's like 7 times the carbon production for the looser urban pattern. And so, and there's many sources where you can kind of try to get these numbers and to understand how these two things are related, the urban pattern and the carbon production. So this project, Aqua, is located in Chicago at what used to be the terminus of the Illinois Central Railroad, right downtown. And so it's right in this area. This is a WPA map, I think 1934. And the developer was able to acquire a number of properties from railroad and other owners to do a 26-acre project. And SOM designed the master plan, and they located everything around a 6-acre park that was to be and has been donated back to the city. And then they were adding about 5,000 new residential units to this former industrial land. And we did everything in the orange there, including the tower and new ballroom for existing hotels and commercial space. The tower is 82 stories, and it has the first 15 are hotel, and then it has rental apartments, and then condominiums above that. And in the base there is townhomes, commercial spaces, ballrooms, and restaurants and lobbies. So it's really a mixed-use project, and it was. Oh wait, I'll show you that again later. It was designed to be, you know, kind of mixed use and bring a lot of these different things together. One of the first times that was done. But more than the carbon footprint, I think the thing about towers for me is just this aspect of excitement that they have. And, you know, if you live in a city as flat as Chicago, it is really your mountain range. It's your place of exploration, as evidenced by these guys who, someone sent me an email one morning during construction of these guys sitting on the top of the tower, and you know, I was a little nervous about it, let's just put it that way. But really they climb down tunnels and climb high rises, but it does kind of represent this notion of exploration and the city, how it beckons in many ways very much like landscape does. As we started to design this, we built out all the buildings that would ever be there, so we would know what the city looked like in the future, and digitally and physically, and started to look for views from the building of specific things. So many towers are designed to be like an iconic, you know, almost like a cartoon. We didn't start that way at all. We kind of started from how you would perceive the building from the street and what you would see from being inside of it. So a topography, you know, has these hills and valleys, And those things allow you to get vistas that you wouldn't normally get. So we kind of applied these hills, I call them hills, to the building, and turned it upright. So this is almost like a vertical landscape. And then some of the hills allowed specific views, to between buildings and around corners from sides that you would not expect those views to be. So it gave this kind of element of surprise. A lot of times when you take a hike, you get a reward at the end of some kind of amazing thing. So it was a little bit inspired by that. And then thinking through the materials, we realized it would be a concrete building. Concrete being fluid material, why not just cut this building into 82 slices and let the hills be the cantilevers and the terraces that allow people to inhabit the outside of the building. It wasn't designed to look like this. This is a view on the left of these limestone outcroppings around Lake Superior. This is from my sister's, lives there. But we were trying to use that more as a model, of the idea of strata and how those strata are shaped by wind and rain and time. And our strata, we use different criteria like access and views and sun exposures to define those. Some of the balconies really extend out to 12 feet is the deepest, so they're really living spaces. And you can see other people, and that was another really important thing. Every time I go in a tall building, I feel rather isolated, and this makes it possible to have neighbors, up in the tower. And now, since it's been lived in for a couple years, we've heard about lots of stories about people meeting each other and kind of saying, hey, and it just makes it more interesting than kind of having to meet in the elevator. So we did have a lot of formal exploration on this building, so we had to understand what was going on with these events, I guess, on the facade, how they would start and stop. So there was a very strong formal period of studying and making it work visually. And then what we did was let the building talk back to us. In other words, where it needed sun shading that wasn't provided by the slabs, we introduced these pools of reflective glass, higher performing glass. I think there's 8 kinds of glass on this building, all responding to the things that were initially created by the form. In wind tunnel testing, we suspected that the varying slab edges would produce some confusion of the wind, but it actually did work. This is inside the wind tunnel testing. And so those different slab edges make it actually more comfortable to be on the balconies. These are I was amazed that the caissons are 12 feet in diameter. They're huge caissons, cages there. And then the way that it was done was using a flexible steel formwork that could be reused on every floor. And so that allowed, one thing I learned about high rises is that time is the essence. If we would have added 4 hours per floor to this building, it would have ended up costing 4 months or 5 months, and on all of these mezzanine loans and things that the owners have, that is really the most stringent criteria. Oops. So maybe I can just show you a little bit of this. It's not going to go, but you can see this on our YouTube channel. But basically shows how quickly the pours were achieved in about 3 days each. So they were able to really move through this building very quickly. And we also designed some of the public spaces here, and these stairs, giant stairs, to take people from the upper street level to the park level. Some views of the entryway, and the hotel will just be opening on November 1st, so that's been still going on. It's got the largest or second largest green roof in the city, about 88,000 square feet, and it's all amenity space where people can run and do yoga dog walking and everything. And this is as seen from the park here. You can start to really see some of the reflection in the pools of the building as well here. So it really has this more three-dimensional aspect as you move closer to the building, and when you're further away, it really is very simple and rectangular. It's interesting. I didn't realize that with tall buildings too, you see them from different parts of the city all the time. Oh yeah, and then these peregrine falcons like to sit up there too. So it's like a perch for them. That's the Chicago bird. Okay, so finally, last thing is really to talk about the project that we're recently working on with the Museum of Modern Art. It was one of the workshop projects. So over the summer, we've been participating in public workshops to sort through issues that were presented to us through the Buell hypothesis, which was a work created by Columbia University. And the show is called Foreclosed, Rehousing the American Dream, and will open in February coming up. So I invite you all to come see it. We've been interested, obviously, in this post-industrial periphery, and the suburb that we started to look at was actually one of the inner ring suburbs in this zone. And this is kind of, these post-industrial areas are rather a disaster in many ways, but the other phenomena that really informs our project is this aspect of world migration, which is still going on, but it's been going on since 1500, and I think by 2080, most of the population in the world will be urbanized. And this movement, and a book recently written by Doug Saunders on this issue called Arrival City was really informative to us. And Arrival City is a place, on this periphery where these rural poor come, they find ways to get a foothold, and then they move on up into middle class. So they're really, he describes them as being, at the best case, they're just these places where poor rural folks can come and basically get going, become part of a city, but part of belonging to this bigger social community and gain education. In the worst case, they can be kind of places of crime and violence and poverty and alienation. And we see that in places like in the suburbs of Paris, for example, where there's really not a city that's responding to this need for economic vitality that we see in this image. And this is an image I took a few months ago in Mumbai. In the U.S., like the suburban areas are the new gateways they are the arrival cities. And I think something like the population is going to grow by 80 million by 2050, and 75% of those will be immigrants. And so immigrants are coming into these suburban areas that aren't really very equipped to usher in all the change that they bring with them, whereas cities in the past, city centers were the place where immigrants were able to come in and assimilate and take foothold. So I think it's interesting, it kind of collides with some other research we've been doing on immigration. United States is the immigration nation. We should be good at this, right? I mean, look at the change that we have had over the years in different ethnicities moving throughout the country. The U.S. should be the best example of immigration. But I think one of the reasons the policy is so, we haven't been able to move forward on reform and improving some of the policy is partly because the suburbs are unable to adjust to having immigrants around. And so this case study in a way touches on that as well. And Cicero is a suburb. It's an inner ring suburb on the outskirts of Chicago. There's many other inner ring suburbs throughout the United States. that have similar situations. We worked on this together with a team, so the MoMA set it up that we would have this interdisciplinary teams, and ours was incredible, including housing advocate Roberta Feldman and Rafi Siegel, urban design. Greg Lindsay is a journalist and kind of urban observer, and Kate Orff in landscape. Theaster Gates, who is an artist who does work in inner cities. We all kind of brought these different ideas together and didn't know really where it was going, but we collaborated through process, and I think we were talking about this earlier, it almost like opened up more avenues for ideas, and we didn't really start with a formal idea. This is the location of Cicero on the outskirts. It's always been a kind of an immigration place, actually, because in the 1900s it was more Lithuanians and Poles and Czechs, and today it's really home to residents are coming from 3 states in Mexico, and really just directly coming into Cicero without going through Chicago at all. Its story is really, it's a railroad town that had a lot of factories as well. This is the Western Electric Factory, which at the height of its peak employed about 45,000 people. And it was later became AT&T, this factory. But in the 80s, as these factories left, the jobs went with them, and you have huge swaths, I think 30% of the land in Cicero is industrial, so abandoned in many cases like this. And so it faces this, poverty and loss of jobs and environmental degradation as well. Many times what they do in places like this, they just pave over the contaminated sites and put in strip malls, which really don't bring that many jobs back, like a fraction of the jobs, and it wastes an important opportunity as well. There were I think it was, let's see, in 2010, there were 1,066 foreclosures of homes as well in this small suburb. So it's kind of very depressing, to see it. So when we looked at this, we thought, there's more than one thing going on here. There's homes in foreclosure, there's industry in foreclosure as well. There's industrial era contamination, some of it worse than others, some of it is just suspected contamination. And so together you get this it's like a disaster scenario, really. And we were interested to think about this in a new way, like could this be the site of economic recovery, or is it going to become the next slum? So the first thing we have to do, we came up with some ideas of what to do. First thing was do the bungalow shuffle. It was basically looking at the housing stock that's there. You can see the factory in the background, and realizing by looking closely at them, you can see these mailboxes on the wall, that it's not a nuclear family living in this bungalow. There's 6 or 7 mailboxes with many names. And we also interviewed people and found out their stories and what they wanted and what they dreamed about. A lot of people really just are looking for opportunities to have jobs. Sometimes they sell things out of their garages or make things and sell them, or bakeries and all kinds of, they have more than one job. But all of this is illegal to do in Cicero because it doesn't accommodate people trying to have the smaller scale cottage industry type things. So the typical bungalow has been divided up into smaller and smaller spaces to accommodate the 21st century, various families within it. So what we said was, why don't we just take the programs apart and make it possible to rearrange them, and the idea being that you could reduce the cost of housing, make it affordable if you only had to buy what you needed. In other words, if you have a family that's growing, you could add pieces onto it over time. If you have relatives coming in, you can accommodate them, and to really rethink about how this building could be kind of a recombinant house. And then we would have to get born-again factories. We looked at a site. We took a site that was a foreclosed factory site, and said, this is really the opportunity the housing fabric, although it doesn't meet everyone's needs, is fine. How can we reimagine one of these bigger sites? First thing we proposed is immediately planting trees and vegetation that would start this phyto accumulators that would start the phytoremediation process. So this should be done like right now in all of these suburbs across the country to start cleaning the soil with plants. Inside the factory, you know, Mies liked, he was basically inspired by these long span structures, and it sparked his imagination. And this is a theater that he proposed inside the Albert Kahn structure as a collage. Today, though, our imagination takes us toward environmental and ecological innovations, this idea that we would rip off the roofs of the factory and start to pull out these contaminants, and then mine the buildings. In other words, like take the materials, sort it, and reuse those for the new buildings. So we propose basically starting out with the vertical circulation, the tower, the stairs and utilities, and then connecting those with community spaces, communal spaces, shared spaces that are made with the reclaimed trusses and green spaces. And then the units, the live-work units would be assembled onto them above and below the trusses. And then these units could be combined in different ways to meet better the needs of the current families. So this kind of new factory rising out of a new way of living, rising out of the old factory. And there would be much more variety in the green spaces. Instead of the ubiquitous lawn, we would have lots of variety, including stormwater management spaces, kitchen gardens, shaded plazas, and much more social interaction than is allowed in the current situation. So if this is our site model, where you can see on the right, this is the fabric of Cicero, is like factories separated from housing, separated from recreational lawns. And in our new neighborhood, and we connect to that, all these things are integrated. So we go from a monoculture to a multiculture approach. And then these are the uses that would be inside. And we try to propose these amenities that would serve the neighborhood and the people outside the neighborhood, and start to close some of the loops for water, material, and food. And then the MoMA team asked us to speculate on a different financial structure for this project, which was really interesting to look at, where we basically came to proposing a kind of a limited equity trust, where you would kind of decouple the ownership of the land from the homes themselves. So the homes could be purchased and they would accumulate value, but it wouldn't be the wild casino-like atmosphere that we've seen in home buying recently. So the amenities and the infrastructure would be held by the trust and stabilize the value. And then we could bring in the foreclosed houses into this network as well, and so that they would be part of this limited equity trust. We discovered that all of the things we proposed would be illegal. Once we looked at the zoning code, basically it doesn't allow any mixed uses, even though the factories and the houses are right across the street from each other. So we would have to rewrite that zoning code, redact it and rewrite it. And then we see how this maybe possibly could transform. If you had the factory site, you know, first you start to introduce the gardens and the phytoremediation. As those trees, and you start to sort the materials, as those trees are pulled out, they could be replanted along the rail corridors. You start to settle and create living and working units and mature, and then connect. So it's not so bad to live across the street from this reimagined factory in Cicero. So I think the goal of the whole thing for us was really just to see how we could possibly imagine a new kind of a rival city in the suburbs in the U.S. That's all. Thank you very much.